The world's best tragedy is often called Romeo and Juliet. I mean, if you've read it or if you know the summary of the story, you'll be like, wow, this is really sad. But I read The Fisherman by Chigozie Obioma and I was like, wait a minute. Have we found a rival to Romeo and Juliet? Hi, welcome to Roving Through Books. I'm Roving and today we'll be discussing The Fisherman by Chigozie Obioma. And when I first saw the title, I do not know what I was expecting. I went into this book as blind as a bat. So I was not expecting the kind of trauma that I was about to meet. Innocent me. Let's fast forward. So I was just expecting a fisherman. Where else have I heard fishermen in the Bible? When Jesus says, "I'll make you fisher of men." So I've had very nice experiences of the word. So I did not think it was going to mean something so ominous, but it did. Why? It talks about these young boys who heard a prophecy, a madman, and it dictates the action that some of them take. So it raises the question of, do we choose our path in life or are we just fated to have those paths in life? So if you remember Oedipus Rex or The Gods Are Not to Blame, where this man is prophesied to do something and he eventually does it. You're wondering how much of our life actions are driven by fate, and do we really have a choice in how our life plays out? hmm So why I said this book is one of the most tragic, it will rival Romeo and Juliet, is because the tragedy in this book touches everybody. Almost nobody is left untouched, even if you are a minor character, because in as much as Apulu, the madman, was very instrumental to the plot of this book, I considered him a minor character because he wasn't the one, he wasn't part of the fishermen one, he wasn't really, really, I don't know how to explain, like he was very instrumental to the story, where you can also see the tragedy that touched his life. Like, I mean, he's a madman, even if you don't know anything. So that's enough tragedy for one person. But he also suffered other tragedies, and it's quite sad. Hmm. Another thing this book does is, I remember reading this book and I finished around 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. I can't remember exactly. All I know is that I finished and I was numb. I was so numb. I wasn't, like, I can't even explain how I felt. I was very, very numb. I was like, what have I just read? And it was in the night. I was just looking around. I don't know if I was scared per se. I was just very, very numb and unsettled. And then eventually last year, I was at a reading where Chigozie Obioma was explaining that his early background as a reader, he read lots of Greek mythology. And it just, I was like, okay, I see the hand that this has in you, because this is a very epic kind of tragedy. It's tragedy of monumental proportion. I'm serious. If you read it, you know that I'm not lying. Because what? How did you think of this? And this is one of the things that makes me realize that as a writer, you cannot be an excellent writer if you do not read excellent books. If you don't read, you cannot be a very good writer. Because one of the reasons why I think he was able to achieve what he did with The Fisherman, but because of the kind of books he was exposed to, he had exposed his mind to. So the taste of his things he had read is reflected in what he wrote. And trust me, once you read his book, there is a way you will feel like you have to read every other of his book. Which is why when this was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, if you were alive, you would not be surprised, because you'd be like, this is really an amazing book. Very, very amazing. It deserves the award that it has been given. It deserves all the accolades it has gotten. It made me an also by fan of Chigozie. Anything he writes, I'm buying, and not to brag, but I have signed copies of his 3 books. I know, I'm saying not to brag. I'm just trying to fake being humble. But yes, because I'm a big fan. I'm a very, very big fan of Chigozie. I think that showed in this review. Well, if you did, that's a good thing. Yes, it also talks about family relationship, how men are instrumental in raising their children. So there's a very common conversation ongoing that, oh, women are the ones who are supposed to raise children, blah 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 and blah. But we see that to a large extent, it was because this children's father was not with them. That's why they were able to do some of the things that they did, and that's what led to what happened. And it's so funny and crazy how after everything, the man eventually decided to listen to what his wife had been telling him since. She has been telling him something since, and he eventually, when everything has scattered, he now say, "Okay, oh, he will come back home." I was like, this is what your wife has been trying to tell you to avoid. And it shows how much of our life has been tied to money, how much we tie many decisions in our life to money, because it's not as if he didn't want to stay at home, right? He wanted to work so that, and where he was working, they transferred him. So he had to be somewhere else, and he couldn't resign. He felt like if he resigned, how would he cater for the family? Because there were quite a number of children. I mean, that's a staggering number, by the way. And he'll be wondering, you are feeding how many children? You will pay school fees, you buy clothes, you pay for food, you pay for this, you pay for that. So he was really just wondering, like making so many mental calculations. Now his wife was also working, yes, but he was the breadwinner. So those decisions had to be laid on him, and they saw the repercussion. Also, he talks about the military government in Nigeria and how certain things were being done, and we see how this affects certain decisions in the book. Because eventually, I doubt the book would have gone on the way it did if it was under a civilian government. But what happened just had to happen. I highly recommend The Fisherman to everybody. Like now, I'm giving you a heads up. Nobody gave me a heads up. This is going to be traumatic. It's going to be tragic. Some people cry when they read this book. Like people shed tears. I didn't, but it shook me. I did not cry over it. I was like, the entire, like, it was such a very painful thing to read. It was such a very painful experience. I think one thing that made it more painful was that it did not feel like I had come to the end of their stories. So, when you read a book, you close the chapter, you're like, oh, on and on it goes. But you see, this one, it did not feel that way because it was like, well, I'm like, what's happening in their life as at now? That's the way I felt because it didn't feel like their stories had ended. Low key, when I heard he had a second book, I was expecting it to be a sequel of The Fisherman. I was so hot when I realized it was an entirely different story. But I like this story too. But it's just like I expected. I don't know, their story for me has not ended. I mean, in an orchestra of minorities, I can accept the conclusion. But you see, The Fisherman, it's so hard to come to terms with that. And that's all for me for today. Bye. See you later.